načina umetničkog izražavanja. Samo...
Kitja, šta si ti ovde donao ove knjige?
A šta, gospođe, eto, potrudi se malo, pa... Dođi. Pa ne znam, duže, znaš šta, sve to čuje.
Kitja, šta si ti ovde donao ove knjige?
A šta, gospođe, eto, potrudi se malo, pazi, ovo su nam oni prethodni festivali Kvir Beograd. Ko je ovo?
u tom trenutku...
Pazi, ovo su nam oni pre... Definitivno, ono se kapersa od malena, tako da... Dođi. Pa ne znam, dušo, znaš da sve to fluidno.
Evi, htio, šta si ti ovdje donao ove knjige?
Znaš da sve to fluidno.
Evi, htio, šta si ti ovdje donao ove knjige?
Da kažem da... Ne mrš, ajde, nema. Hello, Jill. Just to let you know that we see you. Hi. Yeah, and we hear you. Okay, great.
so far.
We're the early birds.
Of course, I'm British. Where are you coming from?
I'm Palestinian. I come from Jerusalem.
Okay, fantastic. Right. Are you getting this coming sound?
Yes. You should put it on you.
Yeah, probably right.
Just so you know, we're starting soon and we see you and hear you.
Just so you know, we are starting soon and we can see you and we can hear you.
Dobar dan.
Good day again. Welcome back to the second session of our conference, Art in the Challenging Context from the Perspective of Gender Equality. Our first session was very exciting and was very fast. 3 hours flew very fast. Agatha Milan will be the first to speak for us.
I can't hear you.
She is an activist for human rights, radio host and author, researcher, lecturer, performer, frequently recognized as the first drag queen of Serbia, a writer and a poet psychological consultant that has participated in creation and public advocacy for several laws, policies and strategies in Serbia, participated in the management of various projects. She published texts and science publications in addition to books and text translation. She identifies as a trans queer person and a feminist. She has participated in conferences, seminars and initiatives. Agatha. Did you get the translation? Jill and Iman, hello again. Did you hear us? Did you get the translation or not yet?
We did not hear anything. That's why we are silent.
Yeah, I heard nothing. Except the very last part of your introduction. I don't even know who you were introducing.
Exactly.
Do you hear me now? Do you hear the translator now?
Yes.
Yes.
First of all, thanks for calling here, inviting me. This is a very important theme that I have lived through. It is the experience from my childhood that has been lived through in various ways. In my childhood, in elementary school, I practiced writing, singing, acting. I founded a small theater in my elementary school with a few friends of mine, and that's why the lived experiences of personal prism and personal perspective are very precious in the cooperation with various researches, theories, and experiences of some other people and so on. Having in mind that we are living in a world that actually has imposed a dichotomy on two poles, gender roles. One is European, I would say the naive, banal concept. I remember Margaret Atwood, the famous anthropologist, and her research, 3 tribes of South America that showed us what is in the Western European context, the ascribed roles to men. In her researches, in some tribes, they had quite opposite roles. In some other cultures, various other cultures, let me go historically back. The cultures of the original Indians, North American, the gender fluidity examples were very present and very well recognized and respected. The persons who were considered as a two-spirited, as they would put it, they have multiple genders, multiple sexes. They were respected, well respected, and this refers to Maori cultures, to Aboriginal cultures, and this is the very important aspect we discussed about, something that is not new, but in a Western European context, in geopolitical context, and of the cultural colonialism context, this post-colonial theory is also extremely important, even in the context of gender equality. Yet Rispil or any other author that is close to you, it is linked in a holistic kind, and I, as a child, expressed genderly untypical behavior. I had, and this is a very important legacy of the feminism, personal political opening. James Baldwin, a wonderful black writer and activist, when we cannot longer breathe in what we are exposed, then we start the revolutionary acts, or with a comparison with showing empathy with the marginalized, stigmatized, oppressed persons in any other kind of a way, I would highlight, apropos James Baldwin, the civil rights movement. Actually, all the moves, whether for black rights, feminist move, somehow platformed the development of LGBTIQ movement. They rely upon each other and they intersect. Apropos the legacy of the feminism, I had an extreme violence in my family. To us children and amongst ourselves, it was extreme. Also, I had an opportunity, I had an experience that in the preschool and during the schooling, I was exposed to very strong violence, in all kinds of violence, mentally, physically, sexually, every day. I had the hell of going out on a big break at school. All guys from my neighborhood knew about me. It was a hell for me, going to the shop, going to the school. Is this for my life in a delusion and the escapism that I needed? It is a reciprocity. You're the isolated guy, you are the lonely guy, and then you get the need to run away into some escapism, fantasy world of imagination and the like. So I had an urge to write, to act in female roles in a binary point of view that is very important for the gender equality contest. And this can be assigned to this. On the other hand, it imposed the additional anatomy to me. In later years, I gained strength and I decided to return to the work, to the performances, to writing poetry. So 1, 2, 3, let me check. This is my personal prism. Very important. I'm a student of the previous speaker, Milana Dragicevic-Šešić, and in the studies of culture, we study the mass culture as well. The art of alternative and many other cultural phenomena and spheres. How much this is important? It is because I felt, and I'm not the only one, social historical context is very important. 1980s, when I grew up as the only one such person in the world, out of all the premises, the postulates of the society, the family, the common norms, the common law arising there from the school, the medicine, the church, at my time, the science, they all had one destructive message that I am ill and that something deep is wrong with me. What is the consequential effect thereof is that I do not need to exist as such. You can imagine what feelings it inspired in me. And all can be brought down to the thing that you do not need to exist. And this means that psychological problems for me. So exactly finding what is in the policies of identity that can be observed from various aspects is very important, is representation. The concept of representation, as Gina Davis Institute that I've been studied puts it, and that actually studies the LGBT presence of women in the film and media. It is one motto of her institute. See it, you can be it. So this is what is present now in the public discourse, both from the point of view of the presence of various colors, various skin colors, LGBT, so in something that is mass culture, that is mass art, how this saves lives, how this helps lives. Whatever we do through the arts, we speak stories, we express ourselves, and this is life-saving. I was saved by some authors, some lady authors, but for example, Annie Lennox was of great influence to me. When I saw her, when I saw Western media, somehow I, as a person of an androgynous energy, of an androgynous image, I realized that I was not so much alone. Later on, it developed David Bowie, or when Ursula Le Guin, I discovered her, or some of the major authors of the 20th and 21st centuries, Left Hand of the Dark, that describes the Ghetto world, that is the world of gender fluid creatures that does not have a history of wars and conflicts. This is endlessly important in grasping the gender equality, starting from the continuity, in the sense of continuity from childhood to a later age. What I said in the discussion earlier, I will use a feminist lesbian author, Monique Wittig, and her book, Country Without Language. I felt as if I was a Dorothy in the Alice in the Wonderland, or Dorothy in the Oz country. I was alone in the world, speechless, without any language, symbolically. So I speak a lot about the symbolic violence that threatens to persons that are not the cis person, the gender that has been assigned to your body, the body that means something, the gender role that has been given to you, the binary heterosexual patriarchal model assigned to you, and then you search to see yourselves in some other people, in their work, whether it is literature, art, some other sphere, and it is extremely important for the life of each one of us. What I also said during my studies, I studied drama art and graduated with Milana Dragicevic-Šečić, but I also studied philosophy based on the research organized by Gaten and Labris. Primarily the books in the secondary school and the books obligatory literature in universities, then the history of art, the psychology. I will give you an example. In the psychology book, you have the stereotypes, the prejudices, and there are examples as a prejudice toward the Englishman and the homosexual, bisexual, transgender person are lacking, totally lacking. However, the highest social distance, the highest prejudice is actually towards the LGBT. This brings us to the intersexuality, since I'm the feminist from my birth, in the feminist discourse. Above all, we have various feminisms. The first wave, the second wave, and now in the third wave of feminism, there is a contradictory concept, awfully contradictory concept. Mass culture, there is a scandal, a statement of J.K. Rowling, a very powerful person, what she said about the trans women. That's actually a fascist reductionist attitude towards the trans women or some other powerful women such as Germaine Greene or Sheila Jeffries or many others. So those dynamics themselves and the relation towards the inclusivity, for me, the feminism is something that is a humanist move. It includes everything, and it needs to humanize, revolutionize all of us. Speaking about the domestic academic circles, I would mention that I was one of the organizers of the Pride. 3 or 4 of us were the organizers. In 2001, you know how it ended. It ended by war in the Belgrade streets. The citizens were brutally
profesorka Šešić I da niko iz Srpske akademije
Nobody from the Serbian Academy of Sciences actually gave a word of support to the LGBT persons and against the violence that they were exposed to that year. This lasted and this was present even within the academic circles. this speaks enough about the prism of the intersectionality of what I stand for years now. Speaking about the gender equality, we cannot leave out the gender minorities. This is the spectrum of trans identities up to non-binary identities. The man that are invisible in the division between male and female, the intersex person, the genderqueer persons, the genderfuck persons, the gender persons, and this neglect of the gender minorities within the concept of gender equality is something that is a very important perspective on which we need to speak, as well as the conflicts and the contradictorities. You have the feminists who build their concept on the post-structuralism, and actually you see that they fall.
Two genders, two sexes, they actually state, as well as we have here, but also in other countries, there's for three, they mean in most of them are lesbians, and they wrongly interpret all the lines and interpretation of Adrienne Rich. She is a famous poetess who actually stands for the world of men, but the feminist movement should not have it as the premises, as well as the world without any kind of exclusion. So Chicano žene, Hispano women, Chicano women, they should not be excluded, but they actually are within maybe means. So class, racial, gender identity, sexual orientation, etc. Are interconnected within this gender equality. My Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is actually one of my mothers. I have the circle of my mother, and she's the most fascinating, according to my opinion, as an activist, also Jane Fonda, because there is no sphere she was not included regarding Negroes' rights, Black rights, Native Americans' rights. During the 1989, James Fonda supports LGBT rights together with Hardy Milcon, etc. But the environmental movement is very important for me as well, but it is also connected with gender justice, as they call it, gender equality. It is related to class issues, working class people, etc. Also with ethnical marginalized groups and target groups we actually specified here. This kind of approach to be included is enormously important. I have tried to give a prism of this kind of exclusion and narrowing and giving a kind of reductional approach regarding gender equality. We have developed what is considered to be subversive. I don't like the word career, but I like the word calling, because I felt that way. I did not have this kind of ambition or pretentiousness to relate myself with queer artistic work. Žarena Papić, the professor, our famous anthropologist, scientist and activist, has once said regarding my first queer performance was at her study. Regarding that, she said, what is the largest postulate of the patriarch context is what actually has a man who stands out of his natural role that was given to him by birth, and vice versa. And this was a kind of precondition and some kind of basis for my studies. Regarding all other theoretical artists who base their work on the analyzing their work, like Simone de Beauvoir with her thesis of woman is not born, she is something that becomes, it's a process, And this is what is also very important. So all the artists and activists actually wanted to disclose, promote, and show in their work, but we have never, even regarding this subversity of the queer scene, we have developed through Queer Belgrade and other projects. What we actually point out is this project activism regarding oppressive political streams, neoliberalism, neocapitalism, misogynists, and all other issues that we have opened regarding sexual work. The dominant discourse actually excludes sexual workers, but what I think is that we actually need more such discourses. I'm going to sum it up. The connection between the art and activism is very important, starting from the local actions until we come to this mass culture. Because a kid in Zimbabwe or Serbia, when they see those role models and it is there within the culture, it is going to feel less alone. And this is the power we should send. This is the message through empathy, which is going to save lives. Thank you, Agatha. Milan. Some issues have already arisen back, like the visibility and representation, but we have also here some new topics like women fluidity. And this is a kind of blind point within our topic until Milan Agatha actually disclosed it within her representation. I would like to hear actually more of this personal experience within this context we live in. Our next speaker, if we have time, we are going to see a short video about Agatha's work during the discussion. Hawn is our the next actually speaker. She's an actor, director, and dramaturgist. She was a member of the world-renowned El Hakawati Theatre from Jerusalem. In 1991, Iman co-founded Ashtar for Theatre Production and Training in Jerusalem, an international theatre trainer who specializes in the theatre of the oppressed techniques. Iman is also the initial artist for Palestine in 2003. The Gaza Monologues, a documentary theatre performance based on the personal stories of a group of children from Gaza. Actually, I have experienced this kind of project. She continues to lead Ashtar Theatre and work regularly in difficult social and political contests. She is a board member of many Palestinian art organizations. Actually, the monologues were distributed to various partners and were performed by 1,500 youth in more than 50 cities in 36 countries. I'm really glad to have you here. When you are ready, start your presentation.
Thank you. Do you hear me well? Just to make sure that the technicalities work. Okay, thank you very much for hosting me. I'm really humbled to be with all of you today. Thank you, Diana and Da Theatre for this wonderful opportunity. So I'm going to really talk about my experience over 4 decades, and it is really difficult to speak about women's situation and culture and art in a conflict zone away from talking about the politics as well. So if you don't mind, I would like to share my screen in my talk, and then I will be going into. Can you see my screen? No?
Yes, they can see your screen.
Just a second. Share.
Yes, there is your presentation. They can see it.
Now you can see it, right?
Yes, they can see it.
Okay, very well. So So as I said, I come from Palestine. I live in Jerusalem. Ashtar Theatre is in Ramallah, but we work all over the West Bank and Gaza and in Jerusalem, of course. Before I co-created Ashtar Theatre in '91, I was part of a theatre company that was called Al-Hakawati. Now, a very quick historical background of theatre in Palestine. I would go by the fact that Palestine had seen various political turmoils. The most harsh and most difficult was in 1948. It was when the Nakba happened and the creation of Israel on our land existed. So before Palestine was a real vibrant country, unlike the propaganda that the Israeli and the Zionist movement used to say, that it was a land with no people for people without land. It was a vibrant, full of energy, full of culture, full of art, and these are only three sketches of the first playwright was in Palestine in 1905 to 1983. She was called Asma Toubi. Then the first actresses were two women from Haifa in 1929. First photographer was also between 1893 and 1940, Karima Abud from Bethlehem. Saying this is just to put you in a context of a country that had a liberal approach towards its women. At the moment where the Nakba happened, Nakba means the catastrophe in 1948, Palestinians fled the country. Almost 1 million people had fled Palestine towards the surrounding areas, Jordan, Syria, Egypt, Lebanon, all the surrounding countries. Of course, that means that culture too had a great blow, and culture, the flow of culture, the theater that existed at that time, the theater, the cinema that existed in the 20s, everything stopped. It was almost a total freezing era up until the late or the mid-50s, when the people started to rebreathe again and started to rewrite theater and to put on new plays. And in 56, women started to be on stage again. Until 67, when another political blow had been in Palestine, and it was called the Naksa. It is the 6 Days War and the occupation of Jerusalem and the West Bank and Gaza. Of course, at that time, everyone was also facing turmoil, cultural situation. Everything stopped again up until the 70s, and then it was a new cycle. So I'm going to really tackle 4 decades of work that I've been working in theater accordingly. First decade for me, when I became a professional actress in '84, it was to convince the society that acting for women was not a social taboo. Now, why this had happened? As we said, I was part of Al-Hakawati Theatre Company. The Hakawati Company started in '77, but I joined them in '84 until '91. why the theater became a taboo for women after the 67 war, after the 6 Days War, the occupation of the West Bank and Jerusalem. Because Israel had started to work on the mass mentality, presenting them images of Arab female artists that are unaccepted by the society, trying to really present art as if it is a low how do you say, a low career to maintain. And this had happened by presenting every Friday a movie that has, between brackets, artists that were considered cheap. And again, between brackets, it is for us analyzing art, we look at it differently. But the social, the society at that time, they looked at the art, at that kind of art, as cheap, because it is not really maintaining awareness, maintaining rights, maintaining political points of views, etc., or social points of views. So what happened is that art and slash actress became a taboo, became socially stigmatized. So when I joined the theater company, we were only five women working in theater in Palestine at that time. So and that goes back to this degrading situation of the role of women in the art. So we had to really put on plays. By the way, I'm the one in the middle here under the mosque. But so, and this is a play about Palestinian diaspora. So the work of Hakawati was mainly the work of raising the Palestinian identity on the local and the international arenas. It wasn't mainly about women or gender. It was mostly about the social context and the political context that the Palestinians are living. So it continued like this up until together, my partner and I, we formed Ashtar Theatre in 91. In 91, we wanted to create a theatre school. It was a time we were coming out from the first Intifada. That the first Intifada means the first uprising of the people in 87. And we were working to establish a program that would give the young people a place, a space, a stage to express themselves, because it was during the Intifada that the young people had lost their education. They had lost their aspiration and their horizon. So everything was quite boxed in their mind towards one thing, the revolution on the ground, the confrontation with the occupation, and they were suffering death and imprisonment by the thousands. So we wanted to go into schools and universities and try to present art as a new means to express oneself, to express the identity, to maintain our Palestinian cultural identity and culture, and to give aspiration to these young people. This is one of the play. I mean, this is in a rehearsal of young girls preparing to do Alice in Wonderland. So the second decade started by just one thing I missed to say is that when we started, we were working a lot with young girls. The number of girls were triple the numbers of boys that registered to our program in '91, and we had to go from home to home to convince their parents to let them continue the program, because we presented a 3-year program for these young people. They were 14 and they would continue their education in theater until they are 18, and that would allow them to further their education post high school and become actresses if they want to go and study abroad acting, or if they want to continue in any other cultural domain. The second decade became the rising critical subjects on stage, and that was post the Oslo Agreement. Oslo Agreement started in '94. It was a time when we thought that now it is our duty to create the sovereignty of our people, to give them the foundation of well-educated, well-cultured society that is building a new country, because we had this hope that the Oslo Agreement will bring our sovereign country next to Israel after the PLO had recognized Israel as a state. So we started putting plays that were critical about, especially when we started to feel that the women's movement that was pre-Oslo Agreement was much stronger than post-Oslo Agreement. What happened is that when the Palestinian Authority came on ground, they automatically asked the women's organizations to really drop feminist movements and feminist struggle and go only into the political struggle. We thought that this is very dangerous. We thought that this is a very big turning point, that when women would drop their rights for the rights of the politics and the nation, we will get into a deadlock, a corner, and this we will see later, whereby women lost their struggle. So this play, Martyrs Are Coming Back, it really talks about this issue. It says that the women that are really giving in for the male politicians are going to lose it all. And the martyrs who are now dead will come back to ask for their rights because we have dropped them. So that was the play. And it really generated a big debate in the political arena. They wanted even to stop Ashtar Theatre and impose the rights of checking. How do we say? Second. Checking the plays before the censorship. So they wanted to impose censorship on art because of this play. But at that time, Yasser Arafat was the head of the Palestinian Authority, and he refused completely these voices and that demand. So we continued in the theater without censorship. Women of Sand and Myrrh, another play that was as critical and as problematic for our society, but it was also a play that was raising the flag about gender equality. It was the first time ever talking about LGBT on stage. And it was the only time. It was in '99, we were able to speak about it, and until the moment, no one is able to really raise that question again, because the society was frantic about the issue. Third decade, the 2000 decade, 2000 to 2010. The main slogan of that era was resilience against social and political violence. Now, in 2000, because the people were, because of course the Israeli occupation continued their policy in taking land, in planting settlements on the land that was supposed to be given back to the Palestinian Authority. Sharon went into the mosque, and so another revolution erupted. It was called the Second Intifada. So the Second Intifada was quite violent. It was more violent than the First Intifada, and at that time, there were 740 checkpoints implanted on the Palestinian Authority land by the Israeli occupation. So people, the land was completely a Swiss cheese. People were completely deteriorated, no hope, and violence was not only on the ground between Palestinians and the Israeli occupation, but that violence was internalized. And this is how it happens usually, socially speaking, when we internalize the oppression and we become our own oppressors. So the oppressed segments of the society, men and women, became oppressing themselves as well. So what we did, we had to go public, and we started to use in 1997 the method of theater of the oppressed, raising awareness of the people against different kinds of oppression. But here we started to also work with community groups, youth from universities, at schools, in community centers, how to use theater of the oppressed to raise their own issues. This was one of the first groups that I trained, a group of young women who raised the subjects of sexual harassment at school, at home, and in the streets. And so this was a new turning point also of our work in using theater of the oppressed within our community, trying to disseminate the idea and using it as a tool for awareness and for change inside the society. The story of Muna was the first legislative theater play that Ashtar Theater had done, and it raised the issue of early marriagehood. Now, at that time, it was the Palestinian Authority started to really base their new laws on the Jordanian, the Egyptian laws from around, because up until that moment we had the Ottoman rules that were ruling our social life. So we wanted to raise the age of marriage for girls from 15 to 18. We did this play as a campaign with different women's organizations, and it was a massive campaign. We did about 160 performances all around the country, trying to raise the issue and to create the debate among the people in order to ask them and to convince them that early marriage is, of course, scientifically wrong, socially wrong, and emotionally wrong. And so we brought together the debate of our mass people in a file that we wanted to present to the parliament, to the Palestinian parliament. And then it was 2005 when the parliament was elected, and Hamas at that time was elected, and then everything stopped until the moment where the international politics had ceased.
Sorry to interrupt you. Iman?
The existence of our had really shackled the existence of our political life
Iman, I'm
and
sorry.
political diversity, and put Hamas in Gaza and locked Gaza.
Hello, just a second, Iman. A second. Can you hear me? Sorry, Iman, to interrupt.
Of having a parliament, a
Hello.
functioning parliament. So
The
we couldn't
speaker.
really present this.
3 more minutes. Sorry. Sorry for the interruption.
Women under the spotlight a year after was a revolt on what the elections had taken us towards, because we all were in a shock, a complete shock, when Hamas had taken the lead and became elected. We wanted to say that women who dropped in '96 the role to be in the front line had now paid the sequence or the consequences, or had paid the price of being put in frame and behind the scene. So that was mainly the issue of that play. In 2009 came I Am Jerusalem, that I wanted to really speak about the loss of the city in a female voice. I assimilated the female character with the city, that for me was a female spirit. And I was telling the story of the city from a female point of view, a woman's point of view, and talking about all the frustration, all the atrocities over centuries, from the time the Abusis had built this city until today. In 2010, the political violence that took place in Gaza had driven me to work with young people and raise their voice. Now, these are some of the students who were participating in that project. They were all together in Gaza were 33. But it wasn't taken for granted that young girls and young boys at that time in 2010 would come together and work, because at that time it was the rule of Hamas in Gaza. We had to break the rules and bring them together and work to raise their voices into the world and to
Hello. Just a second, Iman, to tell you that we have 1 more minute left for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, very quickly, the fourth decade is from its title, Escalating Violence Against Women. Unfortunately, from that time until today, women had been suffering not only physical violence, but also killing. Every single day, we wake up to an atrocity of one or two or more women are killed domestically or by their siblings or by their fathers or by their husbands. This is one of the plays that were raised to talk about domestic rape. We wanted to really, we continue all the time to raise the issues of women on stage. We are part of the coordinators of 1 Million Rising for Justice and the 1 Million Project of the V-Day. We were able to work. We are continuing to work with different segments in our society. This is a workshop with Bedouin women, but we do not only work with Bedouin women. We work with all kinds of different women groups. This is a play that was performed in 2019. It's a circus multidisciplinary performance that talks about the degrading of women from the time of prehistory, when women were goddesses, until today, and how women became slaves due to different wars and different patriarchal actions. This particular play was performed last year in Infant Theatre in Serbia, in Novi Sad. And unfortunately, this particular play, when it was performed in Nablus, this female performer was stopped during the performance and put down from the stage because she is wearing unfit costume for our social norms. So, closing with this, I just want to say that look where we were pre-48, look where we are now. It is a straightforward decline of the position of women. We think that we are in the 21st century, that the position of women should be much different. We should be talking about what we were able to achieve. Unfortunately, we are suffering, or we are subject to killing, rape, and being muted by the day. So, thank you,
dear Iman, on the fantastic overview and the history of the degradation. We just spoke about that in the first discussion, how we think that some problems have been overcome, but we see that the situation deteriorated in all areas, in some more radical than in others. But this is the case, unfortunately, with Palestine. Exactly here, we had an example how various colonial policies are linked with the issue of gender in this presentation. Agatha Milan also spoke about this. The next expose will be from the Great Britain, Jill Green Hosh, from Wales, professional theatre maker since 1978. She has been a director, producer focused on experimental physical practice, work being developed by women, which resulted in the foundation in 1986 of the Magdalena Project, the International Organization of Women in the Modern Theatre became the worldwide organization with ongoing activities in 25 countries. She toured her own performances throughout these years, including Last in Tierra, 7 attempted crossings of the Straits of Gibraltar, the Waters, the Acts Virgia, response to the murders of young women in the Mexico border town of Juarez, the Theater of Silence, and the Book of Space investigating quietude performance, Daughter and Mother-Daughter relationship, and most recently Buried, launched in Brazil. These works have been presented across Europe, the Americas, Asia, and Australasia. She was full-time lecturer in performance studies at the University of Wales in the Aberystwyth. It's been a pleasure hearing of your work. You can start when you are ready. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to give you a brief introduction about the Magdalena Project because that's what Deanna asked me to do. But firstly, I just want to say I wish I was there with you. We are in lockdown in Wales now, so I'm very alone. I wish I could be there among all you women and discussing things face to face, but it's not possible in these days. The Magdalena Project started in 1986 at a festival in Cardiff. So we've had a 35-year history since then of ongoing projects that have escalated without planning. It just happened across 4 continents now. And there are thousands of women who have become involved in the network, the Magdalena Project, International Network of Women in Contemporary Theatre is the title. And there in the 35 years of our existence, we must have had 200, 300 different events happening on those 4 continents. Just last year, we had 2 festivals in Germany, 1 in France, in Chile, 2 in Brazil, 1 in India, in Denmark, in Argentina. I think there were others, but sometimes I even miss myself what is going on because it's got bigger and bigger and bigger. The organisation has no centre, as it were, except for our website, which I invite you to have a look at if you're interested. And any events that take place are organised by women in these different countries autonomously. They are then responsible for the funding, the program. They're also responsible for the name. If they decide they want to make a project under the title of the Magdalena Project, then they must be responsible for the name. But this is created. These events throughout the world, and the women who've taken responsibility to make them happen. It's actually quite a viable touring for women's work. Which has certainly for me been a place where I can show the performances that you introduced at the beginning. In analysing the Magdalena Project retrospectively, and wondering how it's become so big, because we don't have any marketing budgets, we have very little money, because we're women and because it's experimental work. How has it become so huge and worldwide? And in analysing that, I've come to the understanding that it's because it's women, certainly, because women are very good at taking selfless responsibility. And it's because we've created, quite organically, a horizontal structure, not a vertical structure. And most institutions and across theatre, across the world, are vertical structures of hierarchy, where there is somebody at the top and everybody else is kind of striving to get to that top place. In the Magdalena, there's the horizontal structure is a very different kind of operation which seeps into the landscape like water rather than grows and grows and grows and grows until it's afraid of toppling, which is what most patriarchal and what most vertical structures of power are about. So the Magdalena, I think, has been very successful in that way, and I think it is because it is women. Women are much more generous, they're much more selfless. I'm being very generalistic here, sorry to any men in the audience, but I allow myself. So I said it was going to be brief, that I can't talk about 35 years of work in 5 minutes. But if you would like to see the website or to join the Magdalena, it's a very simple process through the website. I wanted to address as well some of the conference themes because I found them very, very interesting. And I want to start with a quote which has served me for a very long time by Lucy Lippard, who's an art historian. She wrote this in 1984. She said, "It can no longer be denied that there is a uniquely female expression. Women's social, biological, and political experiences are different from those. Art must be faithful to those experiences to be authentic." And I think it's absolutely appropriate that one could place where the word women in this, to gay, to queer, to trans, to black, to whatever, disabled. And the same thing is true. What is important in this quote is that art must be faithful to those experiences to be authentic. So this word authentic is what I'm talking about. Across the board, we all have very distinct experiences, and that's what we have to talk to. We cannot speak other people's experiences. What we can do is we can create platforms where those experiences and those stories can be told. And take responsibility and be generous in the inviting of those voices. And I think the Magdalena Project across the world has done that specifically for women, but it's opening up to a lot more in recent years. What we did in the Magdalena, basically, was looking at the patriarchal dominance of the arts and of theatre. We kind of looked at it and we said, nah, I don't want to play anymore. We put the ball down. We put the ball down and we went somewhere else and we created our own game with our own rules. And that is what's grown over the last 35 years. Something that we own, we take responsibility for. And of course, in contemporary life, it's very difficult to get the funding to make festivals. But there are women who have done extraordinary things. In Cuba, for example, we were the first, Roxana Pineda in Cuba was the first woman to create an independent festival. Before that, the only things that could go to Cuba were the National Ballet or the National Ballet. And she invited a whole load of experimental theatre women to make her festival in Santa Clara in the centre of Cuba. And that festival has continued every 2 or 3 years for the last 10 or 15 years. Of course, it's very easy for me to speak about creating work when I'm a white middle class, Western, heterosexual, northern, middle class woman. The only thing I've got going for me is being a woman. That's all. Against being a white man. And so it's possible for me to speak and have those opportunities. But again, it's about how one shares one's privileges. I think. And to move on from that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the title, Arts and Human Rights. And to move on, as I was thinking about the title, I thought, the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights when was it, 1972, is it? 48, I can't remember. It's an extraordinary document and has been, universally important across the world, although, of course, we're still not achieving it by any means. But I wondered if one thought about the Universal Declaration of Human Obligation. And I asked myself, what are my obligations as a woman, as an artist, and as a privileged Western middle class artist? I think if you ask what your obligations are rather than your rights, then you begin to really embrace what is responsibility. How do I take responsibility for creating and for promoting and for staging the issues that are closest to my story and to my heart? And it is not for other people to make that move. You have to make it yourself. As a woman back in 1986, I had been told that there were no good women writers, and this is what hurt so much and made me actually furious, rage, that I had to do something, otherwise that rage was going to eat me alive. And the Magdalena has been an extraordinary place to meet extraordinary women, and I'm very, very glad to meet you, Milan, because we have far too few women from the Middle East involved in the Magdalena, and I'd really like to and hope that you can come to Magdalena very soon and tell us your stories. And the same with Hope in the last discussion. Because I'm British, I'm really neurotic about time, so I'm doing my 15 minutes very quickly. Many years ago in Uruguay, I was at a meeting, there were a bunch of women in a cafe speaking, and somebody cited a very interesting bit of research that had been done. I can't quote it, I can't give you the reference for it, but it basically said that it's going to take another 300 years for women to have equality. That was a bit depressing to hear that, but it really is true. We've made huge steps in the West and in Northern Europe, in North America, but the rest of the world is still got to catch up. And hearing your story again, Emma, about the young woman who was taken down because of the way she was dressed, just fills me with absolute horror. It's like a spiral going backwards. And that's what we have to create, these opportunities where these stories can be heard. It will take a long time, but we will get there. I wanted also very briefly to talk about rights and the rights of our planet. The COVID situation, I feel, has been sent like a lesson to the planet that we are all in charge of, no matter where we live. And we have absolutely exploited that planet to the point where she is so angry that she's sending fires and she's sending floods and she's sending disease to try to get us to listen. And I'm not sure if we will or not. But for me now, thank goodness for Zoom, that means we can make contact. We must learn to use these technologies with more and more alacrity and more imagination in order for them to stay interesting, because they can get very boring. But when I talk about the rights of the planet, what I was going to say, was that for me at the moment, the thought of getting on an aeroplane is almost obscene. I feel like one of the most radical things we can do, and I was saying this before COVID came, is to stay at home. We have had the privilege of travel, but it's destroying, which is one of the things that is destroying this planet. That greed for self-satisfaction. Of course I want to meet my friends, of course I want to be with you. But I think I have to cut down my air travel miles very significantly, alongside a lot more action that needs to be taken to somehow redeem myself in how I have exploited for the last 60 years as a human this beautiful planet that we have been given to live on. I think the words that I want to explore in nature and explore in the coming years, and the lesson I think I have learned, tried to learn from COVID, and I don't know how this will manifest itself in my work, but it's the word harmlessness. I need to learn to be harmless. And I don't know what that means. I also need to understand what we say in Welsh is the square miltir, which means the square mile, to understand and to serve my square mile and the people within it. Thank you. Dead on. 15 minutes.
Thank you, Jill. It's interesting that in the first discussion we haven't spoken about climate changes, and now we have mentioned it twice. True. We should support the Earth, our planet, as the most important among us, and which is the most important for all of us. I have spotted some comment. Let's hear now our last speaker, Drago Barzout. He's a writer, feminist, and LGBTQ activist fighting for women's human rights. She was active in Labris, lesbian human rights organization in which she worked in the field of communications from 2013 to 16. She was the coordinator of FemSlam, an informal soccer sport group from Belgrade that gathered LGBTQ women in order to empower them through sports. She's currently active in association Made Be Know that maps hate crimes motivated by homo and transphobia. Barzout published a short story book, Golden Ballot, and a novel, Paper Disco Balls, as well as edited a volume, Decent Life. She was translated into English, German, Macedonian, Bulgarian, Slovenian, and Polish languages. She won many literary awards. In 2017, American Embassy recognized her as a notable activist fighting discrimination and violence against LGBTN community. Welcome, and we are happy to hear your introductory presentation and expose. Hello to all of you. I'm very glad that I'm present here, and I would like first to thank you for the invitation and to express my feelings and opinion that this festival expresses all the issues that are very important nowadays, which actually is what I have been doing during my period as an activist. The topics have already been opened. What I'm going to do is to focus on some key issues. Yesterday I had some kind of literature meeting where I was in Kosovska Mitrovica. We had an exchange, a conversation regarding literature on the one side from the feminists, writers, and those on the other side, feminist activist writers from the Albanian side. The positive ideas are the result, and what actually was my symbolic meeting between Albanian and Serbian women population and their work in literature as writers is the picture of what I do. It's a kind of active engagement of theory activists within literature, and it can be called as supported literature. But I would not stick to those canons. I would appreciate to speak about my personal perspective. Art, to be human within art, is what I spotted as and identified as very important, and this is the place where I explored and as well as expressed my ideas. I can only repeat that what Agatha has already said. We have some trouble with microphone. This is the place where I could hide and run away from the reality, and which was very hard for me, maybe too difficult to survive very hard, maybe at some moment impossible to survive within. And literature was the place where I found some answers to the questions I made myself. And later this became a place from where I started to be an activist. As a student, I was very active through Neolit. It was a new literature and poetry from Novi Sad. We tried to express and send political messages through poetry and performances against patriarchy and a kind of tyranny. The Neolit against patriarchy and a kind of tyranny. The Neolit from 15 years ago until now have stayed within this group, and with my novel, Decent Life, and paper disco balls as an activist from Labres in 2015, where I gave an expose about my opinion. But after that, actually, I was beaten by those who had opposed meanings. Paper disco balls is something which I transformed my strength as much as I could. And this novel is about women in football, for which purpose I have done some depth study and analysis with women who then played Yugoslavia. The statistical data is that 7 out of 10 were raped by the people from their surrounding, from the family or people who were their teammates. This story I made actually pictured out what I'm in. It is mixed with my personal, with political situation and fictional moments. I included also some of our presentations which are connected to what we had exposed when we were imprisoned in the police. If we cannot speak about it, we can write it, because paper can stand everything. So I considered it as a kind of heritage and proof and evidence to be within the literature. Alt-right matrix is the massive stream and movement of generations which are the part of millenniums. They use extreme radical aspects of political issues and beliefs, and all the research show that a large number of belief in generation and democracy is decreased, very low in numbers. So that's why I actually put football as in the spot, because there, where we are the most vulnerable, we can be the bravest and find the better side of ourselves, and that's why this novel was very important for me personally. On the other side, I did not only fight the violence through this novel and through my activism and organization, May It Be No, which was associated and established to advocate issues from the law. If somebody had told me 15 years ago that I am going to deal with these problems in legal terms, I wouldn't believe. But that night, when I was exposed to direct physical violence, I realized that I must be within this group to be an activist, to be on the spot, and to find myself at the court to fight for the rights. Those exposes of me presentations through literature and art in any form were interconnected, and I cannot divide them and consider them as separate parts, but they are interlinked. So it's very hard for me to think about it separately, but I see that literature, art, everything is the place and the form through which we can fight against all those rights and violence and violating breach of rights that we have been exposed. These negative trends as well that I mentioned both in my novel and in this presentation. Thank you, Dragoslava. I also see here this interconnection as an art as an activism and art as an escapism. This is what all of four our speakers have concluded and had in common while they're presenting their work and activism. In the first part of our discussion, we have already talked about that, but please let me hear successful strategies that you have found during your activism, not only related to problematic discourse or problematic happenings, but also how did you approach all those groups which have opposite meanings. This is very interesting for me to hear about how, for example, these Bedouin women transferred and interconnected with other women from completely other cultures. Let's speak about these successful strategies to deconstruct these systems that are present and a part of our reality. Whoever would like to say something? Okay, so firstly, I would like to draw attention that the human rights movement usually inclines to the left side and left options and concepts. I do not wish to make it more complex between the minority groups and dominant regime, dominant cultural, social, political climate within the country, because it is very complex. Among other things, I have worked with a school for blind children, and what was a very important experience this year's intersections and interconnection between different dimensions of our identities within these schools. This can be summed up in one person or among many of them. I also worked in Gypsy Center and First Gypsy Theater, which was led by two brothers, Dusan and Dragan, Jovan Chirilov, etc. And it is a very interesting experience for me because I had an opportunity to meet on the one side the racism and on the other side homophobia, transphobia, misogynists, etc. We have organized the first group to support for LGBTIQ Gypsy persons. And the program to support the curriculum, which was self-helping, we actually made a kind of international racism research, people within gypsies, and what is the status quo in gypsy community regarding LGBT. The solidarity, empathy that we have built, because regarding one identity, you cannot rationalize, but why did I say empathy and revolution? I'm very glad that Milana Dragicevic started with this, her presentation, revising the culture, empathy, solidarity, friendship, and all other issues which are very important, because empathy is what actually ensures the transfer. When you don't understand somebody's identity, with empathy transfer emotions, feelings, what can be in you enabled through empathy, because in this sense you are put in somebody else's shoes. No matter whether you can understand it on the rational level, you can understand. As a queer person, I have experienced many things, as well as working within these gypsy organizations and centers, as well as schools and other institutions where I have worked. Diversity of experience, I can say. Radio 202, it was LGBT emission, where I experienced some situation. Regardless, our editor actually made a program for LGBT persons and said that you are amazing, I would like to promote you, etc. But because of the presence homophobia and transphobia, it is impossible for me to do. LGBTQ existence and their rights are the issue which is a bad part. The sensibility is a key aspect, because in this way we can learn from each other.
Isms such as feminism and their intersections, I'm glad to hear other colleagues speaking about it, colonialism and so on. We need to observe it holistically because they are interlinked. All the spheres are interlinked. We find the common trend in each and every one of them. What unifies us, what is us, our differences are there to enrich us. Let us not look at them as a threat. There is a trait of a human ego that is good grounds for the fascism, that is the doing away, the killing of another, of the alternative trends. What is the ontological link that unifies us, that connects us? At the same time, alternatives enrich us. The program with the Romani people organizations was one of the good results that we had. Later on, we had a common protest, common actions against racism, against homophobia, which is very important. But these are long-term procedures, complex procedures. I also worked with syndicates, important for work right classes and so on. So the sensibilization of the trade unions, the inclusion of the intersectional categories, LGBTIQ and so on. This work is very demanding. Also, the environmental protection, the vegan movement, the protection of animals, everything a synergy, a co-action regarding a political sphere, what I would say, and I would again call upon one of my famous politician, Alexandra Cortez, the most vulnerable people, and now the discourse is being open, how important it is to have the vulnerability connected to the suffering. The ones who are closest to the suffering need to be on the positions of power, because they can have the empathy towards the other groups that are jeopardized, that are vulnerable and that suffer. Regarding the management, I attended recently a seminar on female management, female leadership, and for the first time we introduced the empathy as one of the very important quality for the general leadership, for the female leadership. If we compare it with the previous times when this was disregarded for the male historical management, I have the problem with world leaders. But New Zealand Prime Minister in her work somewhere. So when we choose the political leaders, Jane Fonda also said, let us make a deal never to choose the leader that do not show the authenticity, the empathy, the solidarity. These people approached as the ones who are most close to problems that we are exposed to. Also, the common activity of all marginalized groups, considering and respecting all our differences, but also all our traits that unify us, and that is our exposition. Our Zoom participants, maybe you would like to comment at this moment, to give some comments on these successful strategies. Give us some successful strategies in our fight. Okay.
Okay, I can speak. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you just now because you're not unmuted, Ivana.
Okay.
So I don't know what you said.
Did you get to hear the question before?
Yes.
So we just wanted to give you a chance to comment. What are some successful strategies?
No, you're still unmuted, Ivana. Okay.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Now I can.
Yeah, we wanted to ask you a question too. Tell us something more about some successful strategies that are in your experience, perhaps, to give a comment. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. It's a very good question. I think what we've learned in the Magdalena that we need a dominance of action. This is really sounding strange. I'm getting an echo. I'm getting a very bad echo. Okay, I'll try. A dominance of action over discourse. So we're a theatre organisation, and the work is the centre of the discourse. The work that people are making is the centre, and the quality of that work is also insisted upon. And not in a way, there is much more raw and young work. It's not pushing that aside, but it is always contextualizing in that in line with more experienced work and insisting on a high quality of theatre work, because there's an awful lot of theatre around that's really boring, and the worst thing you can do is for your cause is to make something badly. So that is the first responsibility. The other responsibility that we've also recognised is that women are very guilty of saying, "Oh, I can't write," apart from novelists, of course. And we have insisted that women write about their experiences as artists. They write about their work, they write about their stories. And we produced the Open Page, which it's not annual now, but we did it for 13 years. And we had articles in the Open Page from all over the world. And we were not saying you had to be a good writer. We were saying you had to write. So some of the work is very raw, and that is fine, because some of the work is very accomplished. And there's bodies of work in each journal. You get a real understanding of different experiences and diverse experiences. So I think the thing of obliging women to write has been one of our major and most important strategies.
Well, can I add, or did you finish, Jill? Yes. Okay, so what I would be adding is, because you have asked particularly a little bit about the Bedouin group, but I want to say that one thing, I mean, we shouldn't take women's lives for granted everywhere. They're not alike. Every specific culture has its own hindrances and difficulties. Now, Bedouin women have very strange problems that they are not, they cannot and they are not allowed to speak in public. They are not allowed to show their faces for strangers. And so to work with them in the first place and to make a play with them and to let them perform this play to each other. Of course, there were only women, but there were also women from other places who came and saw the play. And letting the younger generation talk to the older generation about their wishes of continuing their education and going to university and choosing what they want to learn was not something taken for granted, or is not something that happens on a daily basis. This is something that is a breakthrough in that community. So that was one thing that that this workshop and this project had focused on. I want to go back to the empathy aspect that you're I mean, I'm sorry, I don't know all the names, but that
Agatha,
the first person who spoke, excuse me for not knowing your name at the moment, but you spoke about sorry, but you empathy, and I think that empathy is an important aspect. I do agree with the fact that if we empathize with each other, if we do not accept the fact that we are different, even when we are in the same society, that we have different needs and different abilities, that we are in nature totally with different approaches, different points of views, but we can empathize with each other. We can accept our differences, and this is one thing that we teach and we train our young people to use. And so one of the things that we are proud of, happy about, is that all our graduates, who are 1,100 graduates until now, they even if they did not become actors themselves or actresses, they are able to use theater as a tool to create a better life, as a tool to express themselves and to empathize with others, because they became more socially engaged. They all became somehow activists in their fields. Many of them are working in either politics or business or filmmaking or social entrepreneurship, name it. But they are all having theater training in their background, and they all say that if we did not take theater, if we were not trained, we will not be the same people we are now. So empathy and solidarity. Solidarity is also another aspect that I want to focus on. Solidarity, international solidarity. If we are not sitting together now, whether digitally or face to face, we will not be able to feel the energy. So that kind of solidarity is an important step forward. This is going to save our back, if you want. This is even though the last the last photo that I presented, PowerPoint, was quite depressive about the fact that this artist was put down from stage. But what happened after that the solidarity that she discovered among her peers, young people of her age, and people of different ages, artists and women's organizations, the solidarity movement that was created to speak up and say enough of such atrocities against women wouldn't have happened without this kind of solidarity. Now, the final thing I would say that I'm part of a network of a theater network and a performing arts network, that we are trying hard now to work on policy making in Palestine. One thing that we lack is the presence of policies, because and I put you all in the difficulty of our political situation, and because of the lack of function at the parliament level, we cannot really establish policies that would protect us. And so what we are trying to do now is to look for alternative ways to implement and to write policies through the Palestinian Authority, and make the president at least give some sort of how do you say okay for like an exception for such rules to happen, regardless of the parliament non-existence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jill and Iman. Agatha would like to add something, and then we would hear Dragoslava again. There are various strategies, but we have to include different context in Africa, context in Iran, etc., etc. They are different. Everything that is possible and sustainable and feasible in some context impose the research and finding of various strategies to reach the goal. I remember that there was a group of women in Afghanistan who simply read the books. They gathered together, around 10 of them, and read the books of feminist writers and authors, and it was a revolutionary, dangerous act, but enormously important. On global level, I think that there is a different picture. I agree that there should be policies. We should work on all levels. When in terms of massive culture, all the industries and systems that exist, let's mention film industry, music industry, theater, everything should be adjusted to heterosexual men. What is important is the research of the Institute dealing with treatment, gender treatment and gendered presence within media. Gina Davis, the results show catastrophic results. Ryan Murphy, queer persons, Eva DuVernay. We now have groups. From Hedwig, a woman, as a director, as a music producer or sound producer. But nowadays we are creating a kind of production centers which require, which is the level that's very important. They make requirements to have 50% of women present within the management and employment, to have people as queer persons, various colors of skins, and to make them preconditions. I'm also one of those persons, so we need to be supported, because all the people, not only women, but all other minority groups should be supported in any sense. Black and brown people or other minorities, etc., LGBTIQ persons, etc., should be supported. All the minority groups, especially people coming from poor and non-developed countries. The reception as general. When it comes to film production, I follow everything what queer persons and trans persons do from those cultures which are not in the spot. We also live in kind of e-cultural globalism and imperialism. We should be aware of those internal policies to be developed which would respect the diversity, but as well the reception. I will try to watch a film, no matter whether it's a film, performance, read a book, which give as a result a person who are a part of this diversity and minority groups. I'm thinking about what are the strategies to deploy. I don't know which of them to mention. One of the strategies of how to do, or how we should do, is, for example, those conflicts would be less bloody, if I can say so, to develop strategies of understanding and empathy, which is very important, and I totally agree with this. I would also like to add something. Just a second, it slipped my mind. And I found it very important, but when I remember, I'm going to add, sorry. I think that now this is a good moment to watch a video about Agatha's work, because the subversive strategy is one included in the diversity system. And then we're going to continue to discuss with the participants.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, ma'am, I did try it a little harder. These are our previous festivals, Queer Belgrade. What here is exactly Queer was in 2007 on the transgenderism and sex work, and it was a totally revolutionary theme. Somewhere around 2004, the first...
Ovo je 2007. O transrodnosti i seksualnom radu, što je totalno bila revolucionarna tema.
Nekako u vreme, znači 2004. desio se prvi Queer Beograd festival. To je nekako bio odgovor i na homofobični kao tretman od strane sistema i države, ali između ostalog nekako i nepostojanje tog baš spoja umetnosti i aktivizma u LGBT grupama.
Meni je taj osjećaj kolektiva, zajedništva koji je delio vrednosti u smislu antimilitarizma, antifašizma, promovisanja nekih identiteta koji su marginalizovani i slično, i razne akcije koje smo mi sprovodili ne samo u vidu festivale, omogućio zaista, kažem, jedno novo uživanje, otkrivanje nekih novih dimenzija, politika, vrednosti, zalaganja protiv režima, protiv opresije i slično.
I u tom smislu Queer Beograd jeste bio politički kolektiv koji je nudio neki novi model preispitivanja rodnih uloga, polnih, bilo čega. On je imao svoje trajanje do neke 2008. godine. Tada se desilo da su nas fašisti napali na poslednjem festivalu koji smo organizovale i nekako u tom trenutku opali su kapaciteti da se nešto nastavlja.
Zapravo za mene drag bio neprestano istraživanje, ispitivanje još od malih nogu. Tako da ja počinjem još, znači, u periodu i predškolskom i osnovne škole da imitiram, glumim, pišem jednočinke, gde glumim i ženske likove, pevam, nastupam onome što bi se kostime, odeću i slično. I kada počinje ta nova faza, kako ja dobijam ime ili sebi dajem ime Vivala Diva, još mnogo pre nekih pesama, i pošto je to ime ušlo u neku širu upotrebu, je bio između ostalog jedan moj čin, jedna moja odluka da ne dozvolim da ono što su deca i odrasli pokušali da zakopaju u meni, da ostane zakopano i ubijeno na neki način. I meni je zapravo upravo zbog tog brutalnog nasilja tokom mog detinjstva i mladosti, zbog mog iskoračivanja iz rodne uloge koja mi je zadata i pripisana, bilo posle interesantno baš da istražujem šta je to što toliko plaši, šta je to što zapravo potkopava te neke postulate patrijarhata. Tako da je to istraživanje i tih društvenih konstrukata i onoga što su konstrukti koji su introjektovani u mene, ali istovremeno je obračunavanje sa mojim strahovima, socijalnim anksioznostima, panikama kao rezultatima verovatno nasilja koje je bilo prisutno tokom čitave moje istorije.
Moji početci su bili kad sam izlazila na različita mesta u Beogradu, koji jeste u tom trenutku nekako bio otvoren mnogo više za neku subkulturu. I sećam se tog prvog performansa koji sam gledala u industriji, u režiji Dušice Knežević, i bilo je onako zanimljivo zato što je gomila nekih, u tom trenutku ja nisam znala stvarno šta je kvir, da? I nisam znala šta je uopšte drag scena. I onda sam bila fascinirana, u stvari, tom transformacijom. To kako ti možeš suštinski da promeniš ulogu i da zauzmeš taj nekako artistički stav koji u tom trenutku meni je bio nepoznat. I kad sam počela da proučavam malo drag čitavu kulturu, shvatila sam da ja najviše mogu da se identifikujem sa drag king, sa kulturom koja suštinski mene nekako izbacuje iz to neke sigurne pozicije žene, jel da? Pa me je zanimalo kakva je transformacija, šta ja time dobijam kao muškarac. Koje ja tu sada zadate konstrukte dekonstruišem.
Ja ne volim te termine prva, druga i tako dalje, sve mi je to nekako proizvod egoa u nama, ali ja jesam bila usamljena u tom smislu da zaista nije bilo nekakvih drugih performerka i performera, a ja moram opet kažem da navedem svoje prijatelje Dušana, Vladu, Ivana, i to su nekakvi početci koji su vezani pre svega za nevladine organizacije Gate and Labris. Meni tada opet nije radila ta ideja i ta pretencioznost da mi sad kao otvaramo prostor za neke druge, međutim to je nešto što je verovatno bila možda i posledica da na taj način zapravo senzibilizujemo i otvorimo i možda podstaknemo, inspirišemo i druge ljude.
I Lori je došla i rekla daj da pravimo transritmičnu kuhinsku terapiju. To je bio početak 2000-ih i ja sam bila kao šta? I ona rekla ja ću biti drag queen, a ti si drag king. Ali momentalno sam se pronašla u tome. I odmah se rodio Zed. Ali onako skroz stamen, ponosan, prkosan, mizogin, znaš ono sirov. Ja sam bila čovječe, zar ja stvarno imam to u sebi? Zar je to stvarno nešto što ja otkrivam tek kada mu dam slobodu u tom nekom pozorišnom, performativnom modelu?
Međutim, ono što je prisutno u toj nekoj kvir umetnosti, pa ako mogu da kažem i drag, to je to jedno auto-podcenjivanje i podcenjivanje, a za mene je to zaista je vrhunski hrabar i umetnički, a i politički čin i revolucija prosto sopstvenom egzistencijom i radom kad je bilo ko je drag ili prosto queer trans performer u pitanju.
Mislim da bi žene mnogo više trebalo da probaju da se bave drag king performativnim izražajem, zato što ti nudi mogućnost, verujte mi, stvarno da ojačaš. Zato što ti u tom trenutku kao društveni konstrukt misliš da smeš samo jedno, drugo, treće, peto kao žena. Kao muškarac isto imaš paterne, 1, 2, 3, 4 zadate tradicionalne uloge. Kad izmiksaš, ti se ponovno rađaš sa nekom apsolutno drugom platformom funkcionisanju u ovom svetu, gde ti više rodne, polne, bilo kakve uloge nisu važne, već način funkcionisanja u sistemu kakav je kapitalizam, neoliberalizam, šta se tu od čega mene, tebe, muškog, ženskog, trans osobe traži.
Kada sam uvidela da moje nove koleginice, da tako kažem, i drugarice, da su se pojavile neke nove osobe koje se bave performansom, drag ili kako god one to označavale, meni je to bilo toliko jedan topao i dirljiv moment, da me je ponelo da se zapravo iz te ljubavi i radosti priključim njima, i Markizi, i Dekadenci, i Mariji, Ili i drugima, i bilo mi je nekako divno da opet budem deo toga.
Also from Dublin, who insisted on his personal responsibility in charge for culture and art to offer a different way of life, not only different way of art and performance, but also life as well. And we do not actually here search for the answers, but we just make questions in the sense that we have human rights defined, but we don't speak about human values. As if it is a kind of thing we should not speak about, and because it is integral part of human rights. But when it comes to compassion, we have repeated. But I think that this is the thing that we learn and train. And in this sphere of art connected with and related to human rights, we can offer to public this kind of responsibility to disclose and speak about this compassion, to teach people how to become compassionate. The platform for meeting is the platform where we can practice compassion with each other. If we meet each other, if we exchange the compassion, the experience, at one moment when we listen to each other and exchange all other values that we have on the human level, and understand what is happening within other persons would be the way to teach each other about empathy and compassion. The common need is to find the real and true value within this. When it comes to strategies, I think that all other, we are going to find them on individual level or community level due to circumstances. Thank you for these examples that you have given, both personal and from community, but it seems to me that all of us are within the circle, as if we exchange the opinions within one circle. We do not go out of circles. How can our message get to those who do not understand, no matter whether it is personal or community, traditional, national level, those who do not think the same, who have opposite or different meaning or do not understand. I call it strategy of not giving up from human. We had a driver who actually spoke very bad about migrants during our drive to Kosovska Mitrovica, and since I declare myself to be a feminist, but at the same activist fighting for human rights, I explained in the words that I thought at that moment he could understand my words. So I found a way within myself, within my patience, within my struggle, to explain to him and give him some kind of a different aspect to think of this issue. This is just like not giving up from parents in the sense of hate. So communication, conversation, discussion, including a lot of much love, empathy, since empathy is the product of love and not giving up from people. This is what we should do and teach each other. This is what we have to swallow, not in terms of ego and the possibility to present and say what we mean. In this way, when we do not give up from other people, this is the risk we are exposed to be violated, to be in some way abused. This is what we should do. Don't give up from people, and this is the change which we could reach without giving up. So when I'm not alone, when I go to the public transportation or I go at home, to be is the authenticity, to live activism at any moment, and in this way fight. This is a kind of long-term strategy, one by one. I'm for this reform-related option, not for the revolution. Revolution is very hard, especially under the circumstances we live today, because I'm aware that everything I do today and for Agatha's life during we have actually expressed ourselves, and we think that we will not change much, but for the future, for those generations to come, we would like to give them world for slightly different.
I agree absolutely with Dragoslava in the sense that we tend to think of the alternative side only from the point of view of minorities. We need to hear another people's attitudes and opinions, not only speak to them from some higher ethical position or something that we consider to be the higher ethical position. What about our Zoom speakers? They find it difficult to reach the space to speak. Do you wish to tell us something, to share something with us? Some final thoughts, final comments? Yes or no? Maybe you would like to share some final comments with us. Can you hear me?
I think this word empathy is a fantastic word. If the whole conference is uniting around this word, but what exactly is empathy in action? It always for me comes back to action. We can make many words. We can make many discourses. We can talk about these things. But what is empathy in action on a daily basis or on a practice? And I think that's my question that I would just like to throw out, and which is what I'm thinking about.
I think I would put my my vote to what you said, Jill, because I think it is easy to speak maybe in certain contexts. I mean, we tend to think that we have the solutions or we can make the change, but getting close to 60 years of living on this planet, I think it is difficult. I mean, it's becoming more and more difficult, more and more. I mean, we are living in such small islands as individuals, trying to strive and trying to get to each other. We are all in one ecosystem, but we are all away from each other. I mean, it feels, maybe I'm just talking nonsense, but this is what I feel from everything that we're talking about at the moment. That yes, we need each other. Yes, we have to empathize with each other, but the world is so cruel that is really tearing us apart, and the forces are so massive that no matter what we're doing at the moment, it feels like the walls are just built around us. There's a schizophrenic situation of what we want and what we can do, or what we want and what is happening. So I'm sorry, but I'm not very optimistic.
Agatha, do you have a more optimistic suggestion for us? Message? Yes. I think among other things. I'm an anarchist, and I remember Emma Goldman speaking that racism is a system. Misogynia is the oppression of women, and it is a system. Homo, bi, transphobia is a system. System needs to be changed from the outside, but from the inside as well. Everybody should start from the platform where he can start from. I remember a Spanish activist woman, representative of the LGBT association, and they worked with the taxi association members, speaking about the link between the LGBT and taxi drivers. Everybody within should act locally, and from the general to individual, it's needed into the global context. Everybody should start from the available platform. Looking at the art and culture, they are very powerful means in any one context. What I am glad to see, the actors, the musicians, many other artists speak that my business is a business of empathy. You, as the artist, a writer, a director, Margaret Atwood, very well-known Canadian writer, everything that I wrote actually bases on the real lifetime. Also, the persons, we might have small platforms, but the persons with huge platforms, with bigger platforms, we need to link with them. They are followed by the majority of people, bigger number of people, diverse groups. We should work on various levels. And you know what? It sometimes happened. Speaking about the empathy, that is the highest value. The research showed that various groups of people with the prejudices, stereotypic prejudices, when they get to know the person, that's the best medicine for overcoming the social distance and the prejudice and everything. So simply start from the platform that is available for you. That's exhausting, not easy at all. Especially to create the liaisons with public persons, publicly known persons, you have to pay the price. In Pride 2009, I was included in the board of the Pride. Women support much more such things, support minority groups such as LGBT group. Mira Karanovic, Baby Doll, our actresses did not have any problems. They participated in some movies, and Nikola Đuričko, who is also the artist, and his children were exposed, on the other hand, to huge violence. He is the Serbian famous actor. This is the price you have to pay. On the other hand, linking Nikola Đuričko as a famous heterosexual artist made a signal and spurred other men, triggered them to change their opinions and their attitudes to that sense. Everybody should, I say, start from the available platform. The people with bigger platform should affect bigger number of people, and in such a way, including different people who do not share our values, but we will reach the situation that we can, in a civilized way, exchange the opinions. I have in mind all groups of people. I mentioned Marx 21, transphobic group, his leader, and unfortunately you can see those people in the left party, left-hand side, but we need to create a culture of the open, tolerant dialogue. What is an astonishing experience? I visited the mechanism for gender equality in the various municipalities in smaller towns of Serbia. When they meet the transgender person, the first result is the tension that you can cut with your knife, the silence, absolute silence. But when they get to know the trans queer person, such as myself, and realize that I am a vulnerable human being that has some joys and sorrows the same way as they do, then the tension starts to drop down. This is exhausting procedure. It's not a linear procedure, but it is a procedure of evolution of us as a human beings, of developing of our consciousness, and it is a continuous procedure. Thank you much. Thank to all of you. It was inspiring, left us with a lot of good questions. As we concluded in the previous discussion, the individual actions, but the joint pressures on the system could be a useful strategy. The common joint cohesion that Agatha talked about of all the submersed, all the oppressed people, could give good results. I think Jill said that about something about the empathy in action. What is the action without empathy? What is its worth? What is its worth for the empathy in action? Of course, everybody has its own empathy, its own action, but what touches me these days is that we know we have the modes of everything, the trends in everything. Human rights can be the trend, or they are the trend. We will see what will come out of that. There are millions of actions throughout the world. We can ask ourselves if our actions come into this trap that we don't have the real motive. Without a real motive, the action will not be authentic. So the authenticity, the effectiveness of our continuous life at every moment gives the empathy in the action, in the continuous action. I want to add something. When somebody asks me, why don't I write? I cannot write by heart without any external motive. When I want to sit down and write, I want to communicate something. I want to say something. And so it's not out of my laziness, out of my apathic feeling that I don't write, but you need to have the consciousness of the alternative, of the other. I write for myself. I write what I write for myself. But what goes outside, you need to think twice about that. That is why I understand what was your point. We need, in the authentic way, express what we feel, and at that moment to act. And but the action that is learned by heart cannot be motivating, cannot motivate people to have the political power. Political power is measured by the number of people that support you, but you need to have the empathy, another sincerity, authenticity, empathy at the first place. Now, a few words that we repeated that were present here with us. I think we know all what is the key word of the day, but we return to the policy of remembering, winning of the public space, winning of the space that has been taken away from us, creation of new space, creation of what Magdalena spoke about. Everything must be followed up by the ethics. Ethics should be the starting point of any action. We talked a lot about the courage, the personal courage that is a must in this fight. We spoke about that there is not only rights but responsibilities. Jill very importantly introduced the privilege concept that we did not speak about in the first session, but it is also important for this concept, responsibility and obligations, not only rights. In the cohesion, we should act together as a group. And the training is an important element, very important, because if younger generation, not only younger generation, but the information at any level whatsoever, we spoke a lot about the representation policies, visibility, non-visibility, giving voice. These are the things that we all do in one way or another. Now we need to link with each other and to help each other in the spirit of empathy. That is the key word of the day. Thank you all. This was very inspiring. Hopefully we will see each other soon with our guests through the Zoom and alive. Thank you all the best.
Can I add one word to the pot? Keeping the hope. Keeping the hope up, because sometimes it is difficult. I mean, it is easy to get into despair, especially when you are continuously oppressed. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you and goodbye.